one of the favorites for the Oscar 2024, the movie Oppenheimer, directed by Christopher Nolan, that took home 7 statuettes,
But it's far beyond theory.
has aroused curiosity about the development and effects of nuclear weapons. The narrative portrays the events around the test, from the first atomic bomb, conducted on July 16, 1945, in the New Mexico desert, United States. After this historic milestone, 2 atomic bombs were used in the final stages of World War II, devastating the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, respectively, on August 6th and 9th, 1945. In today's video, we will understand the main effects caused in the event of a possible nuclear war in current times. It's worth noting the importance to understand the consequences of this type of war, to reflect as a society on the advancements of ongoing territorial conflicts in different parts of the world. The effects of a nuclear war were shown moderately in the movie The Day After,
They're crazy! They pressed the button!
which impressed so many people and sparked intense debates at that time. However, reality, as often happens, surpasses the imagination. In that sense, studies on the global consequences of multiple nuclear explosions showed that a severe winter affecting almost the entire terrestrial globe may happen next to a nuclear war. The studies are based on the effects of volcanic eruptions, which emit immense amounts of particles from dust to the atmosphere, preventing sunlight from getting through over large areas. This would cause a decrease in the amount of solar energy reaching the Earth's surface in a planet cooling process. In the event of simultaneous nuclear explosions involving many thousands of megatons, the smoke from the hit cities and the burning forests and the dust released into the atmosphere can drastically reduce the planet's temperature. From 2 weeks to a year of winter, very intense, very intense. Therefore, the effects still depend not only on the number of nuclear bombs detonated, but also on the places hit, the oceans and the sun. Strategists believe that if a nuclear attack is triggered by a power fatally answered by the other, a good portion of the accumulated weapons would be launched. Thus, there is no defense against the missiles carrying the bombs, because many have multiple warheads. That is, they carry several bombs that separate from the missile. Mystical, hitting different targets. Anti-missile weapons would also be ineffective in this case, because once launched at the enemy, the missiles would surely be detected by electronic equipment. They are highly effective. There is just enough time for an enemy to launch their own missiles as well.
Nuclear explosions interact with the very structure of matter, breaking it down and reassembling.
The nuclei of the atoms, consisting of protons and neutrons bound by strong nuclear forces, much more intense than the electromagnetic forces responsible for binding electrons to atomic nuclei, and by the interatomic and intermolecular bonds. Intermolecular bonds that give matter the characteristics we perceive macroscopically in gases and liquids and solids. With the atomic bomb, the shock-wave effect is greatly amplified. Due to the greater amount of energy released in the explosion, it happens elsewhere. Although there is heat release in conventional bombs, which can also cause fires. The temperatures are much larger in nuclear explosions. They can be seen at temperatures similar to lights. Moreover, the pressure at the explosion point rises to millions of times the normal atmospheric pressure. Fission bombs, also known as atomic bombs or A-bombs, were responsible for the destruction
From Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
through the force of 15 kilotons at a time. 20 kilotons of TNT, the modern nuclear fusion weapons, also known as bombs. Hydrogen thermonuclear weapons, or H-bombs, are much more tight, powerful. In reality, these bombs are so powerful, they use an atomic bomb detonation by fission as a trigger for the actual detonation. Thus, the energy released by the chain reaction of fission, initially it's used to fuse atoms, hydrogen reaction inside the weapon. And this reaction in turn releases even more neutrons that create more fission, causing more fusion and so on. The outcome, according to the conservative sciences, with temperatures reaching are temperatures equivalent to those inside the sun. These thermonuclear bombs have been tested, but never used in combat. Lorian Gomez-Santin explains the potential of modern nuclear weapons. Doctor of Atomic and Molecular Physics, Solimar Silva Oliveira, a doctor in physics and professor at the State University of Goiás. The experiment that led to the detonation of the Tsar bomb, which was tested in 1961 in the archipelago of Novaya Zemlya. It is considered, therefore, the most powerful weapon. Its explosion would result in a huge mushroom-shaped cloud 60 kilometers high, 35 kilometers in diameter, and the displacement of air mass, which could cause damage within a radius of mutual on it. In this explosion, it's estimated that third-degree burns could occur in people located up to 100 kilometers away. Then, the spread of radiation could kill or make nearby living beings sick. A relevant piece of information is that after the attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, an atomic bomb has never been used in war again. Even so, poses a threat to humanity as it could cause deadly and devastating harm to people and the environment. In April of 2022, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov caught global attention by warning about the risk from a possible nuclear war. However, analysts and historians still disagree about the exact dimensions of conflict between Ukraine and Russia, although the war between the two nations is already moving into its third year, with no signs of an end. A fitting ending. Some say that the war in Ukraine could perhaps be seen in a context of a kind of, according to the Cold War, while others agree that the conflict could indeed help trigger the Third World War. However, according to Ian Bremer of Eurasia Consulting, the war happening in Europe poses risks not just for the continent, but for the rest of the world, which appears more violent and unstable in this context. According to information from the Pan Monitor, an organization that analyzes the risks of using nuclear weapons, estimates that in the world, there are more than 9,500 nuclear warheads. That is to say, that is 9,500 explosive devices. containing radioactive material, designed to be used as a weapon of destruction soon. Mass. Nuclear warheads represent the main component of a nuclear weapon and are responsible for releasing nuclear energy during an explosion. However, this survey, the number of nuclear warheads varies. As other research, in 2022, it was shown that the United States has approximately 25,550, while Russia would have 5,977 exposed devices, explosives. Together, these two countries would control over 90% of the total atomic bombs existing in the world. According to research, with radioactive fillings, Julio Oliveira would be enough for and destroy all life on Earth several times. Scientists claim that a modern nuclear war could thus kill up to 5 billion people due to the impact of global hunger triggered by soot that would block sunlight, which would affect most of the planet's crops. These population drops would be greater than those caused by the explosion due to the planet's temperature index, which could reach 40 degrees
below the sky.
Estimates were based on calculations.
Joe,
When the foolish
G.com.
would enter the atmosphere following firestorms caused by the detonation of nuclear weapons, researchers used the climate forecasting tool used by the United States National Center for Atmospheric Research, which allowed estimates the productivity of the main crops from each country in this scenario, regardless of the size of each territorial conflict. How a relatively small-scale war would have devastating consequences for global food production. According to this study, a localized battle between India and Pakistan would reduce crop yields by about 7% in 5 years, while a war between the United States and Russia would cause a 90% drop from production between 3 and 4 years. Nuclear winter is a concept that became very well known in 1983 when an article about this phenomenon was published, signed by several scientists, excluding the renowned scientist Carl Sagan. In the context of a nuclear war, given a certain number of bombs detonated, the soot from the explosions and from the fires subsequent, which would ignite the stratosphere, could result in the blocking of sunlight on our planet. In theory, the blockade could be strong enough to lower global temperatures for some time,
A few years
initiating the long-term nuclear winter, which would prevent agricultural production. The consequence of this nuclear winter would result in widespread hunger among the global population, regardless of where the bombs were detonated, and depending on the amount and capacity of the bombs. Nuclear bombs used, the intensity of this phenomenon would be even wider. The article published in the scientific journal, Meaning Natural Food, from August 2022, when referencing climate models, agricultural crop behavior models, and fish stock assessments, to estimate the consequences of various nuclear war scenarios, accurately showed both damage to the planet's civilizations due to the lack of food from the agricultural production of the mid-latitudes and main air combat areas. Cultivation of the planet, which has always depended on the seasons, the sun, and rain. Rain without radioactivity for the fertility and supply of nations. In other words, after the horror of the explosions and radiation, a prolonged phenomenon would emerge, but far more devastating, caused by Nuclear hell. After the damage from the atomic bombs in the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the world realized, indicating that it had entered the nuclear era. For the first time in history, a species had developed. The means to annihilate oneself and nuclear issues joined the list of main themes in international politics. See then, countries have sought ways to prevent that this catastrophe happens and has been striving to create agreement that help achieve this goal. According to the International Peace Research Institute in Stockholm, there are 9 countries that possess nuclear weapons. United States, Russia, United Kingdom, France, China, India, Pakistan, and North Korea. It is believed that the State of Israel also is part of this list, although the country neither denies nor confirms owning nuclear weapons. This mystery, according to the Polizzi portal, characterizes the adoption of a policy called nuclear opacity. In this unstable scenario, the Korean Peninsula, a constant stage of international tensions since the end of World War II, when it was split into 2 opposing regimes represented by North Korea and South Korea, over the decades and after the oil embargo, what the North Americans imposed against the North Koreans in 2002 has become a region marked by development and test, with nuclear weapons conducted after North Korea's departure. Of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, in January of 2003, which I had been part of since 1985. At the time, the justification given by the North Koreans was that the International Atomic Energy Agency, it behaved as a subordinate to the foreign policy interest of the United States, and the treaty would be a tool for achieving these interests. And although it declared that its exit from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty would not mean the country intended to develop nuclear weapons, just 3 years later, in October of 2006, North Korea conducted its first test with an atomic bomb. Since then, 5 more nuclear tests have been carried out. In addition to these nuclear tests, there have been several other missile tests that could carry a nuclear warhead. As a response, the United Nations Security Council has been imposing a series of sanctions on North Korea since 2006, which imposes significant political restrictions and economic sanctions on the country. It's important to remember that these sanctions even have China's support, because even if the country is North Korea's biggest international ally, do not look favorably upon the instability caused by the nuclear threat from North Korea brought close to its border. It was Professor Vitello Brustoli, a Harvard University researcher, says a nuclear war is highly unlikely. However, this does not mean that a conventional armed conflict between specific states will not occur. And if indeed force is used, it's likely to be through unattractive means. The teacher explains that it is not interesting for the countries increase nuclear weapon production, for after a certain point, more quantity would mean reduction, abundance. Given that the no national today is already capable of acting on the planet, according to atomic bomb non-proliferation research centers on the planet, 30% to 40% from the arsenals of the United States and Russia are composed of smaller bombs that have a range of less than 500 kilometers by land and less than 600 kilometers by sea or air, yet these weapons would still have devastating impacts near the explosion zone. They haven't set the stage for a nuclear apocalypse. Global. Meanwhile, these countries' governments have yet to disclose the locations of their nuclear warheads. However, according to experts, most of it is installed on submarines, which makes locating them difficult. That's it for me. See you next time. Bye.